and share their stories. So get ready to laugh your ass off, learn a whole bunch, and be inspired by some pretty badass women. Let's go. Hey guys, we're back. I have another badass female to talk to you today, and I'm very pumped about this one. Today, we are joined by Michaela Quinn. Michaela is currently an environmental enforcement officer with the enforcement branch of Environment Climate Change Canada. She has been with them for 2 years. Prior to that, she was an Alberta Sheriff for 2 years. And she is friends with one of my really awesome rugby friends. Again, it's a rugby connection, guys. I'm telling you, like I've been telling you for so long, rugby's amazing. Start playing rugby. You're going to meet lots of cool people. But she's friends with Tessa, who's one of the girl that used to play rugby with me. And actually met Michaela, not through Tessa, but through Blue Line when she came to run her pair test with me. And so we've kind of known each other on and off for the last couple of years. And I'm super pumped to have you here today, Michaela, just so you can talk about this role. So how are you?
I'm good. Yeah. Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, very excited to be on the podcast and tell you a little bit about what I do. And I think, like we were talking earlier, not a lot of people know that there's an enforcement branch within Environment Climate Change Canada. So yeah, give some people some kind of educational pointers on that, and maybe there'll be some future officers in the mix. So.
Yes, I love it. And I'm so glad that you're going to talk about this because even when we were at Blue Line and we were chatting, and I was like, I'm sorry, what? What is this branch? What is it? Tell me about this. So, environmental enforcement officer and in Environment Climate Change Canada. It's a big mouthful.
Yeah.
So, tell me how you got into this, how you kind of fell into this, because obviously it is kind of a niche enforcement role. How did you find it? How did you fall into it? What's that journey been like for you?
Yeah, so it started on pretty early on. I was so growing up, I grew up in Vancouver. My mom actually worked for Environment Climate Change Canada, used to be called Environment Canada. So probably just for like the purposes of this podcast, we can just call it Environment Canada, even though it's Environment Climate Change Canada, just so we don't have to keep saying that. Yeah, or we could say the other thing is ECCC. So
Okay.
whatever is your preference. Yeah, so basically growing up in Vancouver with my mom working for Environment Canada, I got exposure to what she did. She didn't work for the enforcement branch, but she obviously had some connections in that field, and I'd always been had an interest in enforcement. Policing kind of always interests me, but I also growing up that close to nature, to the mountains, I wanted to figure out a way to, protect that as well. So in grade 10, there was take your kid to work day. So I went with my mom to her office downtown, and they had organized a bunch of different presentations for the kids that had come in. So the enforcement branch presented, there was like the weather branch presented, all these kind of different presentations. And that was like, so I was at what age, what are you, 15 when you're in grade 10? And so that's when I found out about what enforcement officer, an environmental enforcement officer does. And that's where I was like, that seems like a really cool job. Like that's something that I want to do. And so I always kind of had that in my back pocket. I went to post-secondary, so I ended up going to the University of Alberta. I took environmental studies because I wanted to be in that environmental field. And sort of like, and then from there, I realized like I'm going to need to get some type of law enforcement experience because I've got the science background, I've got the policy background, but I don't have the actual enforcement aspect. So when I was in my third year of university, I saw a posting for the student program with CBSA, so the student border services officer program. So I applied on that. I got it, and then I worked out of the Vancouver airport for a summer when I went back home to live with my parents, and then was able to extend that and work part time while I was doing my last year of school at the U of A. So that gave me that enforcement aspect, but I had my schooling, and then yeah, kind of from there on, I kept looking for this job posting, and it just didn't seem to pop up. And so I sort of floated around, did a couple different jobs, worked in a bike shop for a while. That's my other kind of side passion. I'm really into mountain biking and cycling and triathlon. And then I took a seasonal job with Alberta Parks as a park ranger. So it was actually the last year, 2019, before they dissolved that program. And really, I think that was the job that really helped me solidify that. Yeah, I liked law enforcement. I liked the idea of protecting the environment. I always think of this. This is my favorite story from being a park ranger. I was working out Pigeon Lake, and I was doing a patrol, midday patrol, and I'm driving by these campsites, and all of a sudden I just see this like tree, like this massive tree just like sticking out of someone's fire pit. And I was like, I've never seen that before. Like, what the hell? And so I like roll up, and I like what they had done, they had like pulled a dead stump like from out of the bush and decided that they wanted to light that on fire. Obviously, it didn't take because it was like soaking wet. But there's just like kind of crazy things like that that you would see. Um, so yeah, so then I did that for a season, and then yeah, I still was kind of looking for this posting and still didn't see it. And my friend at the time was applying for Alberta Sheriffs, and he suggested that I apply for it. And I did. So that was at the end of 2019. And then COVID broke out and sort of everything was on a standstill. And so I didn't hear anything for months at a time. And then in July of 2020, that's when the sheriff's branch decided to resume training. And so we were the first class to go through with the actual like COVID protocols put in place. And yeah, that was interesting in terms of just figuring out how we could do all the training while still being masked up. Our graduation was definitely it was different in that sense. I know we were able to do our march, but our march was shortened just because they wanted to like limit the amount of interaction that we were having.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so then I was with the Alberta Sheriff's Branch for about 2 years. I started out in Lethbridge because that was the position that they offered. Well, they offered me a couple different positions, and Lethbridge was the place that seemed like the best out of all the places that they had offered me. So I went down to Lethbridge for about a year and worked out of the courthouse there as a sheriff, as a law court sheriff. And then I was fortunate enough to, after just being there like 11 months, I got my transfer back up to Edmonton. And I worked out of the courthouse for, oh, I think like maybe 2, 3 weeks. And then an opportunity came up for me to work at the escort base. And so then I did that for, what do I would say about probably like 8 months or so. And kind of in that time period, that's when I noticed that the posting for the environmental enforcement officer had come up. So I went through that process that took uh, about 8, 9 months. And then, yeah, started with Environment Climate Change Canada in June of 2022. And then, yeah, have been there ever since. And yeah, just kind of due to different circumstances and whatnot, just went through training for this job about a year ago. So now I'm fully designated officer, working in the role. And yeah, it's the learning curve for this job can be quite steep because there's a lot of different regulations that we work under, and no situation's the same. But it's been a journey to get here. But I'm proud of myself in the sense that, when I was 15, I set that goal, like this is where I want to be. This is what I'm gonna end up doing. And I didn't give up. So it took 15 years because I started, or I guess, when did I start? 28. I started when I was 28. So it took 13 years for me to get here.
I love that. I love that you
Yeah.
like say that too, because that's exactly right. Like people, they get like all like, oh, like it's, I'm too old and like I can't and I'm not gonna do it. And like this ship has sailed. No, it hasn't. It totally hasn't. It's gonna take time. It can be a slog. It can be hard. Again, even just saying like to go through the process took 9 months. Like that's gonna be something. Sometimes it takes that long. Sometimes those agencies take a little bit longer. Sometimes things take a little bit longer. But if you truly want it and you've set that goal for yourself, like go for it, run hard for it. So I love that. And I'm really like I'm so interested because like I had no idea about you doing like student CBSA officer or like parks officer. So that's super cool too. I want to just quickly jump back to that student opportunity. So that is like because there's obviously still have it. There's lots of people that
Yeah.
are still doing it, but so you can only do it when you're like a post-secondary student, or is it like how does that work?
Yeah, so from my understanding and like at the when I went through the process, it was 2016, 2017, so it's been a number of years. But yeah, you had to be going to post-secondary. There were most of the students that I ended up working with were in their undergrad, but I do recall there was one or two students that was in their like master's degree program. So yeah, as long as you were attending school, you could stay as an officer. And then yeah, the nice thing was like if you were off for the summer, you work your full time, you do your shift work, and then if you're fortunate enough to work in an area where there is a because that's the other thing too as a student officer, you're not armed, so you're limited in terms of the places that you can actually work.
Mm-hmm.
So that being like the airport and the mail rooms, you're not going to be actually working at the land border. So yeah, if you're fortunate enough to live in an area that has like an airport or a major mail center, then you can work part time as well.
That's awesome because that was going to be my next question is as a student, like, can you do everything or not? So you are limited in your kind of, it's like a teaser, kind of like a taste of like, this is what the job is going to be like. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so you're just uh well, it's I every time I travel, coming across the border seems to change every time, and it's like all like automated. But from when I was there, you were working the primary inspection line, so that was you were the officer that was first engaging with the travelers, taking their passport, scanning it, asking them the questions in terms of why they're coming into Canada, or if they're a Canadian citizen, then you're kind of asking more questions about the goods that they're bringing in. And then you didn't get to work in secondary. So if someone was referred for a further examination as the student officer, you wouldn't be the officer going along with that examination.
Okay. So now, funny question. In
Yeah.
training, did they teach you to not laugh at any fucking thing that anybody says to you or smile or like have any like emotion on your face whatsoever? Because every single fucking time I go through, I'm like, hi, how are you? Like trying to be so friendly and nice. And they just like look at you like, stamp,
Um,
stamp, and send you through.
yeah, I just honestly like, and that was my my thought process going into it too. But it's just, I think it's the sheer volume of travelers that you're interacting with on a day-to-day basis, and like the people think that they're being original. They think that they're the first one that's told that funny joke. And it's like, no, I've heard that like 10 times today. Like it's not funny anymore. So I can see that was like, at least from my perspective, that's why it was just like you got that like dead face on because you're just like, I can't take this anymore. Yeah.
Okay, I get it. I get
Yeah.
it. So I'll just be like nice and like hi and then go and I'll just keep my
Yeah.
yap shut. Okay, 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 okay. Noted.
Yeah. Yeah.
um okay, and so then now moving into the role that you're playing now. So what was that
Mhm.
like what was that process like? Like what is it like is it similar to police? Like you go into an info session and then you're putting your application in and then you're like is there a fitness test? Like what does that process look like?
Yeah, so it's I would say it's kind of more like the um RCMP process, but maybe slimmed down a little bit more. So you've got your online application that you're going to submit through the Government of Canada webpage, and there's a bunch of different questions that they're going to ask you to see if you meet the competencies of the job. And so one thing that I always recommend when people are like applying for that job, make sure that you fill out every single box. Don't leave a box blank, because that's a good way for you to potentially get filtered out. Um, and then yeah, so you go ahead and you fill out that application. It gets submitted. It goes into a pool, and then you're assessed on your, like, they look at your resume, they obviously look at your application, and then from there you're weeded down into a smaller pool, where you would write a test. Every year the test changes, but it usually has something to do kind of related to our legislation. So whether that's the Canadian Environmental Protection Act or the Fisheries Act. So they'll ask you some questions in relation to that and sort of what we do in our job. And then you'll have an interview, and then a psych assessment, medical assessment, and then if you're kind of successful through all of that, and there's a position open, then you would typically get a job offer. So that's the process that I went through, and from my understanding, it's pretty much the same now. But every year things kind of seem to change just with the advancement of technology and the ever changing roles and responsibilities that we have with our job. So yeah, don't quote me exactly on how that application goes, but that's the gist of it, and that's how I got through.
Is there like a requirement like there is for Fish and Wildlife to have like an environmental sciences background? So you have to have the schooling and the law enforcement in order to kind of be screened in?
Yeah, so there's it's kind of like a combination. So they do look at a number of different avenues, but yeah, they typically want you to have like schooling, whether that be in like environmental sciences, environmental studies. There's a bunch of different programs offered at the U of A. At like Lethbridge College has a really good conservation program. So you've got to have, yeah, you got to have a schooling in some type of environmental field or conservation. And then it is definitely a bonus to have like your law enforcement experience. But I do know there's also been instances where people have come over from other law enforcement agencies. So they've had experience from, yeah, let's say CBSA or maybe a provincial agency, and that can kind of be used as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And no fitness test.
No fitness test, which is, yeah, is interesting in that sense. But yeah, there's no fitness test.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, cool. And then what's the training look like for it? Are you going to basic training again? Are you running through the whole like the sheriff's patrol or drill and things like that?
Yeah, no, so the training's, yeah, different. It's a mix of like online and in-person training. So the first couple months is all online. So you've got your instructors that are sort of all across Canada. So in my case, when I went through training, we had one instructor that was based out of Edmonton, one instructor that was based out of Vancouver, and then another instructor that was based out of Regina, and then we got one more based out of Montreal. So they come together, and then they'll teach you kind of the differences between your inspection powers, what it means to transition into investigation, what legislation we'll be working under, and then after that, you go through that online training, and then we do like a in-person training. So that would be more of your scenario-based training, and that happens in Ottawa, and it's about 7 weeks in length. And then we also do our control tactics training as well. So that's, yeah, I guess in total it would probably be, what was it? I guess for maybe like 4 months ish. I guess if I was to total it all together in terms of training. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then is there like an FTO process? So like once you're done training, you're getting mentored by like a senior staff or like a, an experienced staff?
No, but there is something called the Officer Development Program, which is you start as your classification, which is a GT4, which is just a um, just working level enforcement officer, and then the next level is your GT5, which is you're classified as a senior level enforcement officer. So there's a bunch of different competencies that you need to meet. And you have like it's a big booklet that you have to be able to demonstrate like how you've done that. So it is like an FTO program, but it's a little bit more on your own, in the sense that you need to look to see what you have, and then you can work with other senior officers to get that experience. You're obviously working with your manager closely to make sure that you get to that promotion when obviously you meet all those requirements.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get to the meat and potatoes of it. What
Yeah.
do we do every day? We go to work and we are saving the environment. And how are we doing it?
Yeah. Yeah, so I kind of alluded to it when we started, but as environmental enforcement officers, there's two major pieces of legislation that we typically enforce. So the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, and then the pollution provisions within the Fisheries Act. There's also the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Prevention Act and provisions of the Antarctic Environmental Protection Act. Those are two other acts that we can enforce, but my experience working in Alberta, I haven't touched those pieces of legislation. So yeah, so typically we're going to be going out there and inspecting different facilities, whether it could be like retailers, it could be big industry like oil and gas, and making sure that they're complying to that legislation. And within the Environmental Protection Act, there's what is there? There's like 60 odd different regulations underneath that. So it can be very specific to what industry we're looking at. So you got fuels regs, you've got engine regs, you've got halocarbon regs. It's all just very kind of specific, but it really basically, if you want to dumb it down, it just has anything to do with the protection of the environment, right? So whether it's a release of a substance into the atmosphere that could potentially be harmed, that needs to be monitored and that needs to be looked at. Or it could look at, when we look at the pollution provisions of the Fisheries Act, that has anything to do with a spill of something that would be toxic, or in the wording within the legislation, deleterious, into a water body that's frequented by fish. So that's another component of our job, is we will be responding to spills. So if there's, a major train derailment and they're carrying crude oil, that crude oil spills everywhere and happens to get into a water body where there's fish, we're going to be going there. We're going to be collecting samples, kind of figuring out what happened, potentially, if it's merited, transitioning into investigation, conducting statements, and then kind of just going on further from there. And then we can go all the way to recommending a prosecution if it's merited.
So then you're obviously working very closely externally with like fisheries, biologists, forestry, things like that. But then if we're going into like facilities, you're working with OH&S people, you're working with like health and safety style people too. So you're kind of like jack of all trades, going everywhere, doing everything.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So like you nailed it. Like if we're looking at a facility that has like air conditioners or refrigerants, they contain halocarbons, and if those halocarbons get released, they can deplete the ozone. So that's why they need to be regulated. So yeah, in that sense, we would be working with maintenance. We'd be working with their health and safety to make sure that they understand those regulations, and they can also help us to explain how their facility works and what type of procedures they have in place to make sure that everything's operating correctly. But yeah, then if we're out in the field, we're going to be working with with the our Alberta counterparts, with the provincial government, potentially conservation officers, fish and wildlife. Yeah, it just depends on where we end up in that sense.
And so how like is your day decided? Like, are you reactionary in that like, oh crap, this happened, we're rolling out, which I can see for like spills and stuff like that? Or is there like, oh, today we're doing checks, we're doing regulatory checks, and here's our list of buildings that we're going to, and off we go?
So I would say a lot of this work that we do is planned. So we'll have like referrals that'll come in through intel, or potentially through complaints, and so we'll look into that. We might also just have general regulation targets based off of, hey, we haven't been to this facility in X amount of years is probably time we go back. Um, and then yeah, the other component would be reactionary. If there's a big spill that comes in, we're going to send the available officers. But I would say, yeah, our day-to-day work is it's probably about 70 to 75% in the office, and then the other 30 to 25% would be in the field, just because there is a lot of planning that has to go into planning these inspections. A lot of the sites you can't just show up. You got to get in touch with the right people. If you're going up to like Fort Mac to go to some of those sites, there's obviously a bunch of different safety orientations that you need to go through. So those all have to be set up in advance. And then there's that component. And then when we're out in the field, we're either like interacting with the regulatee and asking them specific questions about their facility and how it relates to the regulation, or we might be collecting samples, right? So we might be collecting those water samples, or other samples that would align with our legislation.
And so are you working shift work, or are you working usually Monday to Friday?
Yeah, so for the most part, it's Monday to Friday,
Nice.
like your typical 9 to 5. And then there's obviously, if there's something that happens while you're on call, or there's a big environmental event that requires us to respond, then we might have to work on the weekends or later into the evening. But it is a good setup in that it does help with that work to life balance. And there's a lot of officers that I work with that have families, and that schedule is really conducive to that.
Yeah, I was just thinking,
Yeah.
like, if you're looking for that enforcement role, but you're not wanting the shift work, is what a great kind of marry up. And
Yeah.
are you in uniform or in civvy clothes?
So yeah, when we're in the office, we're just in like civvy clothes, like business casual. But then yeah, when we're obviously out in the field, we're out inspecting, we're in full uniform.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, wanted to pop on here before we got into this next episode and let you know about a couple new rad ideas that we have for the podcast. So, the first one is we have a survey up, and I would love to know what you guys think about the show. I'd love your feedback. I'd love your ideas for the next season. And I'd just love to know what you like and what you dislike about the podcast. And I'm going to sweeten the deal with a $50 gift card randomly drawn from everybody that completes the survey. The survey is going to be in the show notes of all of our shows. So no matter what time you start listening to the podcast at, you'll get a chance to win that gift certificate. The second thing that we're bringing in now is the ability for you guys to leave us a voicemail. You guys can actually call into the show, leave us a voicemail, let us know what you think about the show. If you have a funny story you'd like to share from your time as a first responder, I would love those and showcase those on the show as well. So make sure you guys check out that voicemail feature. It's going to be in the show notes, and check out the survey. Make sure that you get that chance to win that gift certificate. Awesome. And then are you like, what do you have with you? Like, do I'm assuming you don't have a sidearm. So what do you have with you?
Yeah, so just like your typical kit that a peace officer would have. So obviously your baton, your OC spray, handcuffs, full SBA, duty belt.
Okay.
That type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you're going out on these like scheduled calls, how do you find people react to you? Like, are you the hated person that you walk through the door and they're like, oh, for fuck's sakes? Because I have a really good friend, Kaylee, who's an OH&S officer who I know is going to love this episode. And she says, like, I'm just so used to being hated by everybody. As soon as I walk on site, everyone's like, oh, fuck, here comes a fucking OH&S bitch, right? So is that what you're getting? Is that the reaction you're getting from people? Or are they just kind of like, yeah, this is part of the process, like, off we go?
I would say more so this is kind of just part of the process, like, and we're just going to do our best to comply. I would say mostly in the case, because it's different than like other law enforcement jobs where I've worked, where it's like, the individual that you are working with, like they're the liable ones. Like they're the ones that are like, oh crap, I'm the one that's in trouble, right? So you're probably going to get, potentially more pushback. But usually, yeah, you're when you first go in, you're interacting with like the lower level staff that don't really have a whole lot to do with um, operations. So they're pretty receptive. And yeah, I mean, some people are stoked when you come because they're like, oh, I don't actually have to do my job today. I just get to take these officers around and show them stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. You're like, yes, I am the
Yeah.
reason you get to just be on a break all day
Yeah.
and do show and tell.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so the other kind of like side of this is like, do you have like a tip line, or is there like a, like I'm thinking, I'm the lay citizen and I see what I think is an environmental issue. I'm seeing, a plant that's close by my house is dumping a bunch of yucky smoke into the air. Like, is there something like that you'd get a complaint from the public and then you'd have to follow up on that?
Yes. So we have like a partnership with the Alberta government. So you can make a complaint through Alberta Edge, and I'm forgetting what Alberta Edge stands for. Environmental. Anyways, it's basically, yeah, it's like your tip line. So you would call into there and just if you see anything, you might be like, oh hey, like I noticed my neighbor dumping a can of paint down the drain, or
Hmm.
I think I saw this weird substance on the lake. So that'll go through the Alberta Edge line, and then from there it gets triaged out, and then we'll get notified through that. So that's typically how we'll receive our notifications. And it's set up similarly in other provinces as well. But there is, as per like our legislation, there is a requirement to have spills reported. So then companies are supposed to report when they have an oopsie in that sense.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
so like if something like that happened, like I'm just thinking like it's a great example, like you're
yeah.
out on the lake, you're like, whoa, that's weird. There's something out here, and you report it. Is it because like now I'm thinking like how does the government in Canada and the government of Alberta both kind of work together? Because technically the lake is in Alberta, so it would be like Alberta's lake that they're supposed to be checking on, but like the lake is in Alberta that is in Canada, which is your legislation. So like how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of overlap between the provinces and their legislation and our legislation. Um, so there's like I'm not super familiar with Alberta's legislation, but there would be like the Water Act, and there's going to be certain sections and provisions within that says you can't do this. But as long as like our legislation is triggered, we're going to be out there responding. Probably in this case, also we're going to see other provincial agencies also responding, and so. Usually, to some extent, we will like work together and kind of share information as we can. But then, yeah, obviously, once we transition into the investigation, that's where things change, and you're not going to be readily sharing information.
Yeah. So you're moving to Vancouver. You've taken a transfer. So now we're going to go out of the prairies. We're going to the ocean. How's that going to change your work? Like, obviously, I'm assuming somewhat different legislation and that maybe, or maybe additional legislation, different duties. Like, what's that going to look like for you?
Yeah. So I guess, and with this, because there's the environment climate change Canada is within the federal government, so there's offices across Canada, with there being a number of offices in BC, Alberta, and then as you go east, there's more offices, right? So in this case, I will be, when I transfer to the Vancouver office, I will still be working under the same legislation.
Mhm.
Um, but probably I'll be working under like different regulations within that legislation, just based off of yeah, where I am. I don't exactly kind of know, like there's a number of different teams within the Vancouver office, so I'm not really 100% clear on like what that's going to look like in terms of like the team that I'm on and like what type of files and different regulations that I would be working on. But I mean, a good example would be, case in point, Vancouver's right next to the ocean. So you're probably going to be working under the Fisheries Act more so than you might be working under SEPA, just because the ocean's right there. There's the likelihood that there's going to be releases is just higher.
And so how many people, because it was kind of, I was meant to ask it earlier, but how many people are in your role? Like, so you're in Edmonton right now. How many people are working with you as as environmental enforcement officers?
Yeah, so I looked up this number just before we started talking. So there's roughly about just 139 officers, and there's, like I said, there's offices in almost every different province and territory, and then just depending on the size of the region, the size of the city, it's going to vary at how many officers work out of that office.
Okay. And so
Yeah.
I'm assuming Vancouver's probably going to be bigger because
Yeah.
bigger city.
Yeah,
big
Vancouver is
ocean.
one of the bigger offices. Actually, Edmonton's a relatively big office, just because our region or our territory that we would enforce is anything Red Deer south, so up to the border there.
Okay.
So we do have a number of officers in Edmonton just to be able to cover that territory. But yeah, in Alberta, we only have the two offices. We have one in Edmonton and then we have one in Calgary. So right now in Edmonton, I think we've got 10 officers, and then down in Calgary, it's only 6 officers, I believe.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other question I had was, so you get the file, you do the thing, you go, you check it out, and you're like, well, okay, this merits an investigation. How long are these files kind of taking to move through the process? And I know it's hard because some of them will, like, oh, gets resolved into that. But if we take it to like we're going to prosecution or we're going to like a recommendation for prosecution, how long is that taking?
It could take like a couple of years. Like I can tell you that I've been working on this one investigation, and um, I keep thinking it's coming to an end, but then there's, new information. So I've been working on that for a year, thus far. And probably I would assume there's probably maybe another year on top of it, just if you were to from start to end, and,
Mhm.
if it did go to prosecution and what that would look at like. But yeah, some of our, like, we don't always take files to prosecution. Like we do have other enforcement actions that we can take on companies or individuals. So that could be like as simple as just issuing like a written warning. We have AMPS, administrative monetary penalties. We have the ability to like issue directions. So that's for people to take certain measures to stop an offense from happening. And then the other one would be obviously recommending prosecution. And then that's up to the courts to kind of decide where it goes in terms of fines and whatnot.
And are you required to go to court? Like, is that, like, okay, you put together this file and now we're going to testify and we're going to give statements and things like that?
Yep, yeah, 100% if it ends up happening that way. I haven't had that happen yet, but I'm sure in my career that could happen.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just, yeah, like I'm like, my mind is just spinning of all these things because again, there's like these regulations and that they're out there,
Yeah.
but you kind of forget that like somebody's got to be responsible for like making sure that they're adhered to, right? So I'm like, oh, the Pollution Act. I'm like, oh yeah. And like, oh yeah. So yeah, like just and such a broad like scope of different things. I think fascinating. Like just every day would be something totally different, which is super cool. And so now kind of like transitioning, you're getting out to Vancouver, you're gonna go do some new adventures out there. What's the plan to kind of like keep learning, keep on top of things? Like is there continuous like developments or like do they send you on training to keep you kind of up to speed or like how does that work?
Yeah, so I think like it's a little bit of both. Like there's lots of different training that they will like send you on. Like I just finished kind of not really maybe specific to the legislation, but a good skill to have. Like we were just out in Calgary doing swiftwater rescue training, but there's always if new regulations roll out or if amendments are made to the regulations, there's always going to be like a training seminar usually. And so typically that's online, just because if you've got your officers all over Canada, the easiest way to present that is just through Zoom or through Teams. So there's always those different types of training. There's different training courses in terms of different like investigative techniques, interviewing skills, things like that. So I would say there's always like probably since I've started, I'm going on a training course probably at least once a year for different things like that. And then obviously like just being a law enforcement officer, you've got your research for control tactics that you're going to do every year just to make sure that you're staying on top of that. I guess like in Vancouver, probably will be just getting used to how the office operates in Vancouver, just because it's going to be different. It's going to be a bunch of different officers with different dynamics, and then figuring out potentially working under the Fisheries Act a little bit more and the regulations under that. And so I mean, I'm excited for the challenge. I definitely, like you said, this job there's a lot to it, and you're not going to figure it out in a year. Like there's one officer in our office, and she's been there for like 8-9 years, and she tells me she's still learning. She's still figuring out things, just because the work that we do can be quite complex, and you're not going to be an expert in the legislation that we enforce, just because it is very detailed.
Well, and I was going to say, like, with all the changes, the constant changes coming, right? Like climate change is a huge thing right now. And so there's constant amendments, changes, adjustments, restrictions, things like that, that you guys, you'd have to be like, okay, we learned this week and now it's different. Great. Let me learn the new version.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. Well, like I said, I mean, tons of information. My mind is just like whirling around, but thank you for sharing it all, because like, again, totally untapped market of like enforcement that I had no idea of. And like, again, really cool. Like if you're not looking for the conservation side of it or the fish and wildlife side of it, like here's another way that you're still contributing to environmental wellness, and you're still saving the environment just in another kind of role, and out there doing that work. So that's so cool. So I usually wrap up my podcast with kind of like some rapid fire questions. I really like these ones. So I'm gonna hit you with my number one fave, which is what is your favorite food or snack while you're on shift?
Well, I would say it changes, but lately it's been cheesies, because I've been training for this 50K ultra, and a couple of months ago I was running with my friend, and we were like kilometer 30, and I was just like slugging along. Like I was like, I don't think I can finish this. And she, out of her backpack, she like whipped out some cheesies, and they were just like the lifesaver. So ever since that, like anytime I'm out and I like need a snack, I'm like cheesies.
I love that you just like casually mentioned that you're training for a 50-kilometer ultra run and that you're eating cheesies at 30K. I would be eating cheesies before we ran and be like, you know what? I don't think we need to do the run. We've had the cheesies. We're good. For our listeners, if you've never met Michaela, she is ultra fit. Like ultra fit, this girl is like, she's ridiculous fit. It's amazing. I like in awe of you and your fitness. So good for you. Good for you. When's the race?
This weekend. So October 13th, the Saturday.
Okay, well, good luck. Kick butt. Let me know how it goes. That's amazing. That's so cool. Okay, second question I would have would be, what is the coolest like location or place that you've gotten to go to because of work?
This kind of just like recently happened. I was out conducting a inspection at a coal mine, and we were actually looking at some of the different haulers that they have, because part of the legislation, and one of our we have engine regulations, so there's different emission regulations that have to be adhered to. So we're taking a look at these engines, but these are like huge haulers, like they're massive, and we got to like climb up on them and take a look, and just like, and it was like in the valley, so it was just epically like beautiful. So I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, I don't think very many people get to do that. I mean, other than the people that work in the coal mine, but yeah. So that
And
just that happened a couple.
where was the
It
coal
was
mine?
it was just outside of Edson, probably like 45 minutes south west of Edson. Yeah.
Very cool. I didn't even know there was a coal mine out there. That's so
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, those haulers are insane. Sometimes my husband works on like the radiators for them, and they're like 14 feet by 14 feet. And that's like the radiator that comes out of it. And I'm just like, oh my God, how big is this machine? And he's like, yeah, it's that big. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Like, okay. And then the last one I have for you is what would be a piece of advice that you would give to somebody that's kind of looking to get into this career, interested in this side of things, environment, enforcement, that type of thing?
Yeah, so I would say like yeah, kind of do your research, figure out like you're definitely gonna probably want that schooling component. Um and yeah, just like come and like talk to us. Like I'd be happy to kind of provide my information, because it's, yeah, it's not something that, unless you're specifically like in that field, or like I know for like Lethbridge College, they have a bunch of different presentations in terms of jobs that you can get into. So that would be a way that you would know about it. But yeah, if you're just kind of generally looking to get into law enforcement, or, you know, potentially fish and wildlife and conservation, but you realize that maybe that isn't quite the right fit for you, but you still want to protect the environment. Yeah, so just, yeah, kind of do your research, look up what Environment Canada does. We have a whole page dedicated to enforcement notifications, so you can learn about a bunch of previous prosecutions, and that can kind of give you um, an idea if that's something that you think you want to work in, and that's the type of legislation you want to enforce.
Oh, that is so cool. Yeah. Okay. Well, we will
Yeah,
definitely be putting that info in the show notes because that's super
yeah,
cool. And it's like you said, I think it's totally true because like the only way that you found out about it was going like bring your kid to work day. And so like
yeah,
if you're not going
exactly.
to work, if your mom or dad doesn't work there, you're not finding out about it. So
Yeah,
very, very cool. And I love that's the one thing I love about this podcast about the women that come on it is everybody is just so willing to share their knowledge. Like, call me, stop by, I'll take you for a tour, we'll go on a like, you know, like come with me, we'll do a ride along. So yeah, that's phenomenal. And I think it would be a super cool, just even just a learning thing, just to go and see like what is this like, what is it, you know, what's the day to day, what are we actually looking for when we're going through this, and is it something that somebody's interested in. So if you are listening and it's something that piques your interest, I definitely will put Michaela's info in the show notes, and take a look like you said at that page, or kind of into that environmental side of things. Maybe that wasn't even on your thought process. Or if you're in university and you're in environmental studies or environmental science and you're going, what am I going to do for a job? Here's a job. It's super cool. It'll be definitely fulfilling. That's for sure. So, well, yeah, it's been a slice, girl. You've given us a ton of information. I really appreciate it. Do you have any last words you want to give to our listeners? Anything you want to share?
No, I think, yeah, we covered it all, but yeah, I'm big into promoting like women in law enforcement. So if that's something that you want to do, like stick to it. There's lots of different options out there. You don't, like, if you want to become a police officer, great, but if that's not something that you want to do, like you've got corrections, you've got what I do, environmental enforcement. There's tons of different options. So figure out what's the best fit for you, and just, yeah, persevere and you'll get there.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
love that. Persevere and you will get there because it's not always easy, guys. It's not always easy. It's not always an easy slog. Sometimes, again, the recruiting process is going to take time. Sometimes the training is going to be real fucking tough and you're going to have to, you know, slog it out. But you will get there. You'll get that job and it will be amazing when you get there. So awesome. Well, thank you, girl. You go enjoy the rest of your evening. Are you going running tonight? Are you going to train for your big run?
No, I think I'm just gonna taper. I did a run this morning, and that'll be my last run, and then I'll do my big 50K on Saturday. So,
Oh, well, okay. Where are you running? Where are you guys going?
it's in Canmore, so it's out of the it's the Grizzly Ultra, so it's
Oh,
starts at the Nordic Center there, and then you've got like multiple loops that you do.
Beautiful. And it's going to be gorgeous this weekend. Like,
Yeah,
gorgeous.
sunny and warm, so
Oh,
it'll be great.
yes. Okay, don't get eaten by a grizzly bear, okay?
I'll try not to.
Okay, good. And then keep me posted on how it goes.
Yeah, I will.
Awesome. Okay, have a great rest of your night.
Okay, yeah, thanks. You too.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Thanks so much for tuning in, listening, giving me your time, your energy, and your attention. I completely appreciate it. Make sure you check out our next episode with another badass female first responder anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. And follow us on Instagram and Facebook at bluelinefitnesstesting.com. I hope you stay safe, keep your head on a swivel, and watch your six.